Madam President, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
It is, I got to tell you, it's an honor for me to finally get a chance to have a conversation with you.
We're Facebook friends.
That's true. But this one is, we could have it over Facebook if you want. And the reason why this is an honor for me is because I know of the work you've been doing for the church. I see all that, but I feel like I really don't know you. So I just felt like this was an opportunity for me to, when they said that you were going to be on the first show, I was like, yay, this is kind of cool for me.
Thank you.
So I've got to begin, and to give you an idea, we'll talk about the convention, and that is why we're here inside General Convention. We'll talk about that in a moment, but can I hear more about like you in the sense of, when did you first sense your calling? Like, what were you driving in your Mustang, or I don't know what you were driving, and like fell out of your car and it was a call like Paul, or was it more gentle and over time? Could you talk about that?
Sure. I was always drawn to the church. I grew up Presbyterian.
Oh.
And I preached for the very first time. I got to do the youth sermon in the Presbyterian church. I'd never preached before. And honest to God, I loved it. I played Beatles music for the sermon. That kind of freaked out the congregation. But I thought, gosh, this is interesting. So I went to college, and I went to Colgate University, and I had some great professors. I really wasn't thinking about ordination, but I majored in religion and sociology, both of which would get you not much of a job.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
but in any case,
get you a cup of coffee somewhere.
Maybe that. And right before my senior year in college, my religion professor came up to me and he said, "I'd like to nominate you for a Rockefeller Trial Year Fellowship to go to seminary for a year." And I said, "Why would I do that?" And at that point, I was going to the Episcopal Church. I said, "The Episcopal Church doesn't even ordain women." He said, "Oh, don't worry about that. Why don't you just go?" So I didn't get the fellowship. I got to the finals, but I was so fascinated by that I thought I would go on my own trial year. And so I applied to various seminaries and went to the Episcopal Divinity School in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I went to see my bishop. I went to see him 2 weeks after the women were ordained in Philadelphia in 1977, 1976. And he said, I said to him, "I'd like to go to seminary. I want to do a trial year." And he said, "Well, women can't be ordained yet. What are you going to do if you're not ordained?" I said, "Something else."
That would seem obvious, wouldn't it, Bishop?
Something else. I thought I could go to law school. There were a lot of different things that I could do. I got to seminary, and it was an exciting time in 1976 in the Episcopal Church, and women's ordination had been approved, and I actually entered seminary in 1974. Which was right after the ordinations. And then I graduated in 77, which was right after the General Convention approved it in 1976.
Wow.
And
so you're amongst the first.
I was early. I was not ordained immediately after I graduated in 1977. My seminary had this my diocese had this requirement to spend a year. You couldn't go high school, college, seminary, and then be ordained. So I had to do a secular work year before I could be ordained. And so I worked for a travel agency, and I coordinated tours to the Holy Land. And the only reason they hired me is because they figured I knew something about the Holy Land.
Right,
So
you've been to seminary, so you know something.
So I did that for a year.
Okay.
In the meantime, in seminary, I met my husband, who was a postulant from the Diocese of Virginia. I was from the Diocese of Central New York. And we got married right before our senior year in seminary.
Oh.
And then we graduated, and we moved to, we moved to the Diocese of Virginia, where he was ordained, and stayed there for 3 years, then moved to Ohio. And we both went to different parishes. And then I went to work on the bishop's staff from 1986 to 2003 for a long time.
Yeah, you were canon to the ordinary.
Canon of the ordinary.
Now, going back for a second to the call part. So for you, it wasn't like a momentary sort of like trumpet sound.
No,
it was more of a little by little.
It was like this.
A little tug.
Just a little tug. And I took courses in college, but I never really thought that's what I would do with it. And so that's really why I went on the trial year, because frankly, I'd never seen an ordained woman, ever.
That's right. And do you think that color, do you think that influenced the fact that it was a little by little rather than had it all from the get-go been like, that is a possibility? Had your bishop not had to say to you, like, what happens if you can't get ordained,
Right.
Would that have been
I think anytime you cannot see the incarnation of what are the possibilities for you, then perhaps it comes more slowly.
Okay. Wow, yeah. Well, I'm certainly, that's a fascinating story. I'm glad that you stuck with it, and went along with it. And of course, you got it there and you became canon through the ordinary, and you have served the church in so many capacities at this point.
Yeah, I've been really fortunate. I've been a hospital chaplain, I've been a parish priest, then I worked on the bishop's staff, and then I worked for Credo for the pension fund for 9 years. And I really didn't have any intention of, I love General Convention. I thought General Convention was the best thing since sliced bread the first time I went. I went in 1976 to my first General Convention. I was a senior in seminary.
Okay.
We got married in August, and I said to my husband, I made the first of many governance-related requests to this extraordinarily patient man. Said, I'd like to go to General Convention. They're going to vote on whether or not women can be ordained. Could you set up the apartment? And he said, sure. So off
God bless him.
God bless him. God bless him for 42 years.
Wow, and it takes a special kind of person to be willing to be like, yeah, I want to be there when there's that vote, and that's special to me because and to be able, and you drove yourself there, right? You went off
I went with a bunch of other friends who were also seniors in seminary. In fact, those were back in the day, we stayed in kind of a flea bag hotel. There were 6 of us. And that was the day when we had at General Convention, there used to be, like, you go to all these receptions and there was always food at all these receptions, and that's how we ate all our meals. We went to from church group to church group to church organization and we would kind of go and
So that's a tip. If you're here at General Convention and you are on a budget, just make sure you get the schedule.
Go find those.
And when they say, why are you here? Well, President Jennings said we should do this. So.
But it's really amazing when you think about it, or at least when I think about it. Women were ordained, the General Convention adopted the canon, to change the canon, amended it so women could be ordained in 1976, so the 1976 General Convention. Yeah. But what most people don't realize is that women could not be deputies to General Convention until 1970.
I got to tell you, that is mind-blowing.
So what happened was the General Convention for the very first time decided to study the role and place of women in the church in 1821. So it took a little time. And there's a long history of heroic women and their allies who are men working towards expanding the circle for full inclusion. And that's why I love General Convention. Because General Convention is not just about passing a budget or electing people or determining what our policies on our various things. Our General Convention, what I learned when I went the first time in 1976 was that General Convention can change lives. Because it's changed my life. I watched it. I watched the vote happen. And I said, my life's going to go in a particular direction. Even though I could do something else, that was the direction I felt called to go in. And that vote allowed that to happen. And we've done that over and over in our history, certainly in our recent 50-year history, in terms of expanding the circle, in terms of who is included, who can be ordained, who can participate in the governance of the church. In 1967, at the convention in Seattle, now picture it, all men in the House of Deputies, all men in the House of Bishops, right? And there's this amazing woman who just died recently. Louita Bailey is her name, from the Diocese of Atlanta. Louita was the president of the Women's Triennial of the Episcopal Church Women. And she was invited to speak to a joint session, the first woman to be invited to speak.
And this was in 1967.
This is in 1967, to speak at both houses at the same time. And the invitation, at the time of her talk, was going to take place after the vote on whether or not women would be allowed to serve as deputies. And so there's this wonderful thing that Louisa said. She said, I decided early that morning to wear a red silk suit and announce that to the whole triennial meeting that if they voted no, I was dressed properly for the martyr. And if they voted yes, I was dressed properly for the celebration.
Oh.
Is that an amazing story?
She
said, I'm going to go, I will go there, and I'm going to stand like a woman. Well, the vote took place, and they voted to admit women. And what she talked about in her memoir was that she walked down that middle aisle, and the entire General Convention, the joint session, both houses stood and applauded, and then she addressed the General Convention.
Oh.
And so since it was a constitutional reading, the women were not seated as deputies till 1970, and I think there were 13 or 14 in 1970. And now here it is, 2018, and for the first time, the House of Deputies is majority female.
What?
About 52%, I think,
it
is
gives
women. It gives you a little goosebumps.
Yeah, it really does.
And so General Convention does change lives. Think about what we've done in terms of ordination, in terms of our sacraments, in terms of our public policy, our witness in terms of social justice. Instead of saying who's in, who's out, let's just draw the circle wider so all are welcome.
And that is one of the beautiful things about the Episcopal Church. I mean, it may have taken us a while, and certainly from 1821 till 1970 to be able to finally make a change on the ordination and the placement of women. Don't even get me started, that's way too long. But if you can sort of see, as you say, in the last 50 years, how that has sped up, how the prophetic voice of the church has sped up. And I think that's one of the great things about General Convention. We may come here and we may not see eye to eye on something.
Right.
But we see eye to eye on one thing that matters most, and that is that we're trying to be the body of Christ in the world.
Absolutely.
And so we may disagree how that happens, but let's keep working at it.
Exactly.
Let's disagree civilly and be like, you know what? I see your point, you see my point. We don't agree on it right now. Let's pray about it some more.
And we take our time to discern and debate and decide. We're actually a very conservative legislature. First of all, we're bicameral, so that for something to be an active convention, it has to pass in exactly the same language in both houses. And when the House of Deputies votes by orders, which is really, is complicated to explain, but it essentially means a supermajority.
Okay.
On the biggest issues, be it around matters of governance, matters of justice, any matter, by the time we actually agree as a whole convention, we actually really mean it, because we've spent the time to look at it, consider it, study it, discern, debate, decide. And sometimes it takes a short period of time, and other times it takes a much longer period of time. But generally speaking, we don't go back. We're not a church that says,
it's a good insight.
We make a decision, oh, that didn't work so well, so let's go back.
Yeah.
Instead, I think we take a good amount of time to make the decision and to look at it as a whole body and then come to a conclusion.
And of course, with some of the decisions, there's always going to be those that want it faster, right? Because it impacts their lives much faster. Like if it had been about the ordination of women when you were being ordained, you wanted that decision much faster than it happened. But I see, your point is a good one, which is that we keep moving forward because of the fact it might take us a little bit longer than we would want it sometimes, but
Right.
it always at least is moving forward. And
Right.
and at least it's not taking it 150 years anymore, right? That's
Mostly.
mostly. So I have a question for you. As you look forward at convention in the next 10, 12 days that are going to be really busy for you, so make sure you get some rest, make sure you hydrate well. It's really hot outside, and it's about to start raining in the next couple of days, and the humidity, I don't even want to know what it's going to do to my look. But
I think it'll be all right.
thank you. When you look ahead at these 10, 12 days, at the end of it, for you to be able to say, you know what, that was time well spent, that was a good use of our time, what would make it a good convention for you? What would, in the sense of, and I'm not talking about specific legislation or not, but just in the sense of the feeling of, we've done good here?
It's a good question. For me, part of it, a large part of it is how we get to where we're going. So I say at every point I can, how we go about making our decisions is as important as the decisions themselves. So treating each other, first of all, collaboration, not competition. We're not here to compete.
Yeah.
We're here to see if we can discern the mind of God and how we are best called to not only order ourselves, our internal governance, but what witness do we want to make to the world? Now, what I love about our governance, people say, oh, why does it take so long? And why are we here for 10 days? And 350 resolutions, are you kidding? Can't we reduce that?
That is a lot.
But think about it. Those we're not a church where decisions are made from the top down.
That's true.
You know, any bishop, any deputy, any diocese, any province, any interim body can submit a resolution. Anybody. And then every resolution goes to a committee, and every resolution must have a hearing. So any person who's a visitor, who's registered as a visitor, or as a deputy, or as a bishop, gets to say, this is what I think about it. They get to testify.
Yeah.
So that's why it takes time, because what we want to do is we want to listen to one another.
And like you say, it takes time because we're really careful about the process.
And we care that as many voices as possible. Can be heard. I don't worry that we disagree about things. That's the great thing about the Episcopal Church, in my mind, is that our unity isn't based on agreement on particular issues, but our unity is based in Jesus Christ. That's where our unity is found.
Amen to
And
that.
if we can hold on to that during these 10 days of convention, then I'm confident that whatever decisions we make will be ones that will build the church up.
Wow.
And able us to be witnesses to the world.
I think you're absolutely right, and that would be a wonderful way of capping this convention. Our time is up. My producers keep telling me, get done with it,
All right,
get over
all
it.
right.
So, but I could talk to you for much longer. So, I hope that you will think of this as your home. Whenever
I'd
you want
love
to
to
come on
come
in, if
back.
you want to
Love to
share
come
something,
back.
please do so.
You're
We'd love
a great
to have you back.
interviewer, too.
Oh,
You're great.
go on.
Yeah.
We're going to go to commercial in a bit. Go on. Tell me
No,
what
you're
not.
good.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
And have a wonderful convention.
Thank you.